Welcome to today's tutorial. My name is Dr. Hamid Keda, and today I'll be going over some lessons to help you with your collaboration. Okay, so to get started, today we are going to talk about computing and interpreting percentages. So in this particular lesson, we will explore how percentages are used to calculate taxes, tips, and discount, and how they can also describe change and probability. So why is this collaboration important? Um, because percentages are everywhere. You hear about people talking about percentage, all the time, from tips to sales tax to measuring change in health data and in finances. You'll hear people talking about percentages all the time. So it is very important to understand how to use them and how to interpret them. When you master percentage reasoning, you'll better understand prices, budgets, health risk, and even voting statistics, which we'll talk a little bit about in this tutorial. And it's very important for you to also go through the preparation part of your course to get familiar with some of these basic terms before you go into the collaboration. So preparation, the big picture about percentages. So what do we need to know? So basically, a percentage is per 100, okay? So it's like parts per 100. So if I say 1%, that means 1 out of 100, okay? So it's per 100. 1% is 1 per 100, 1 out of 100, okay? So percentages can be, relative, can be relative, can be used relatively, comparing different events. Um, but basically, it measures a portion of a whole. So if I say 1%, that 1% is just portion of 100. Okay, so it describe portion of a whole. So percentage can describe changes, probability, and comparison between quantities, which we will talk about here later. Key terms that you need to understand is in this collaboration is taxes and tips. Um, if you're adding tax to a particular price, how do you do that? So if you add tax to the original price, obviously the price is going to increase. So it's for us to figure out the total price, that would be total price is equal to the original price times 1 plus the tax rate. Okay, if the tax is 5%, then that's going to be the tax rate. If you are to tip 5%, so it's going to be the original price times bracket open 1 plus 5%, or 5 divided by 100. And that's going to give you the total price, because that 5% is going to add on to the original price, and that is going to give you the total price. So how about if you want to find the original price from the total? So you are asked to pay something, you want to figure out, okay, like how much tax or tip did I pay? Um, so you can reverse engineer to find what exactly you paid in taxes. So this is what will help in terms of determining the original price from the purchase after you pay tax or pay tip. So the original price is equal to total price divided by 1 plus the tax rate. Okay, so the tax rate is usually comes in percentages. So whatever percentage you have, you divide it by 100, that's going to be your tax rate. So now, with this basic understanding, we can go ahead and apply this to some examples and consolidate our understanding with using percentages. So problem situation 1, competing with percentages. So this is an example where Illinois has 6.25% sales tax. What is the amount of tax on a $120 purchase? So you buy something for $120, but the sale tax is 6.25 in Illinois. You're gonna end up paying more, but how much? How do you calculate that? Okay, so let's do some identification here. Just try to pull all the information we have in the question. We have a purchase price of 120. We have a tax rate of 6.25%, right? So if we just want to know how much we're going to pay in taxes, well, we can do that. We can say, well, the tax, I think I did not include that in the formulas, but just to guide you, if we just want to know the tax, we could just say, well, the tax would be equal to, let's say, the original, right? So you're buying something in Illinois, which has some certain tax rate. So the original times the tax rate, okay? So you want to multiply the original price times the tax rate, okay? So this will give us the tax amount that needs to be paid. So we can do that. We'll say tax is equal to the original price, which is 120, right? 120 times the tax rate, which is the same as saying 120, which is the original dollar amount, times the 6.25%. So either you put 6.25% divided by 100, or you just say 0.0256. So if you do this calculation, it's going to give you what, 7.5. Okay, 7.5. So this 7.5 is due to the tax that we have, the sales tax we apply. So instead of paying 120, you will pay 120 plus 7.25. Okay. So the follow-up question is, what is the total price including tax? Well, that's just going to be the original price, right? The original price of 120 plus the tax. So, okay, so now we have 127.25, which is the total price, including the taxes and everything. But at least we know how much of this amount is a tax. Is 7.5, which is the tax here. Okay, so we can move on to another example or question. So here we have similar question, but what you're gonna do here is the try it yourself question 1. Just pause the video and just try it yourself. A pair of shoes costs $80 and the sales tax is 5%. How much is the tax? What is the total price? Okay, so this would be no-brainer, similar to the question we just talked about. Just take a break, pause the video, do this calculation yourself, and then come back to see what your answer is. All right, so let's just go over the try it yourself question that you just did. So basically, this is similar to the prior question. So if we want to know how much tax we paid, we're going to say, well, tax is equal to the original price. Okay, we're gonna find the original price, and then we're gonna add the tax rate. Okay, tax rate. So in this case, the original price is $80. $80 plus the tax rate is 5%. So 5 divided by 100. What is 5 divided by 100? Right? So you can either say 0.05 or 5 divided by 100. So I'm just going to go, because 5 divided by 100 is 0.05. So 0.05. Okay. So 0.05, that's your tax rate. So if you multiply that by the original price, which is 80, then you will end up having like $4. Okay, about that. So now your tax is $4. Your total price is basically the original price plus the tax. So we're just gonna say 80 plus 4, which is 84. So this is the total amount that will be paid to get this pair of shoes at 5%. Okay. So that was your try yourself question. So let's see the next exercise. Example 2. Example 2. A student paid $185, including tax, 6.25%. What was the price before tax? Okay, so this is slightly different questions. They paid $185, which include a 6.25%. 6.25% of tax. But like, what was the original price before the 6.25% applied? Okay, so again, we have to go back to our original price formula. This is what we put at the beginning, that the original price, right? Like the original price okay. The original price is equal to your total price okay, so your total price plus your tax rate. One plus the tax, this would be like tax. Okay, total price Original price is equal to total price divided by 1 plus tax rate. Okay, so we paid a total price of 185 divided by 1 plus the tax rate. The tax rate is 6.25%, so 6.25% divided by 100, that's 0.0625. Okay, so you add this, it's going to be 1.0625. So 185 divided by this number, you have 174.04. So this means that the student was supposed to pay 174.07 before tax, but after applying the 6.25%, that number went up, and in total he paid 185. So if we remove the effect of the tax, it's gonna be 174.07. If you include the tax as in the question, it's gonna it's gonna go up to 185. Okay, so the amount of money before tax or the pre-tax is $174.07. Okay. All right, so let's move on to next example 3. Jacob earned 30,000 and paid 3,398 in federal taxes. What is his tax rate? Okay, so we can do this similar to some of the questions we solve, but we know his earning and how much he paid in taxes in total. So if we want to know the tax rate or the percentage of his earning that goes into taxes, that's easy. We just want to know what fraction of the 3,398 is 30,000. Okay, so to figure out the tax rate or the percentage rate, we will say the rate is equal to the amount paid in taxes divided by the whole times 100. So this will allow us to quantify the amount or the percentage, okay, the percentage of this 3,398 of 30,000, right? So we want to know what it's not a fraction, but what percentage of 3,300 is out of 30,000. So if he's paying 3,398, like what percentage of his total earning is that? And that would be the tax rate, because you need to pay that in taxes according to this question. So 3,398 divided by the whole, or the total, which is 30,000, times 100. So multiplying by 100 would allow you to convert this fraction into percentages. So it's going to be out of 100 now. So now with 11.30%, that means, about 11%. So for every $100 Jacob earned, about 11% is going towards taxes. So that's the meaning of this number, 11% of 30,000. So roughly 11 out of every $100 he earned goes towards taxes. So it makes it, very easy to compare and understand if you make things out of 100, right? So that's the purpose of using percentage to compare figures. Okay, so the next question, example 4 is federal spending by category. So in this type of questions, you want to make sure that you have a percentage for each of this category right here. But these numbers here are the amount of spending per category in billions. So for you to be able to do anything, you have to have a whole or a total. Okay, you must have a total. So if this is the spending for each category, then this would make up the budget or the total amount spent on each category. So if you add all of these numbers, it's going to give you some total here. And now that's going to be a total. So to figure out the percentage of each of these category, we are going to say the total here. If you add all the, it's going to get you to a total. So what we're going to do instead is say 751, right? So let's say here, all the numbers here in billions. So we just add 751, 1200, 1339, 475, 1583, 19. You add all of that, it's going to give you some total right here. So that total divided by 751. Okay, we're doing percentage, so you must multiply. Sorry. So actually it should be, we already have 751. So let me take that back. So what I was trying to say is that if you add all this number, you're gonna get to a total, and then that's gonna be the whole. So each of these categories is gonna be divided by that total. Okay, so you take 751 divided by the total you get from adding all the categories times 100. All right, that's going to give you 7% here. And then you do that for this again, the 1200. So 1200 divided by the total. Okay, times 100. So that's going to give you another percentage here. So that means you have to do for healthcare, you have to do for internet, so net interest, you have to do for other mandatory, you have to do for other uh, uh, discretionary spending. So you have some amount for that. So you have to calculate the percentage for that as well. So the first thing you need to do is make sure you add all these numbers to get to a total, and then you divide each of these category by that total times 100, and that's going to give you the percentage. So that way we will say, oh, for Defense Department, the category of the federal spending is, let's say, 17% or 20%. So we can categorize each of these sections based on categories instead of just numbers like this. So we can convert each of these numbers into some percentages, but we need to get the total of each of these numbers when you add them. Okay. Okay. So that was just a brief overview of how to solve this type of questions, but more detailed here. So as I said, you have to add all these categories. And if you add all of them, you have 6258. Okay, so you add all of these numbers, you add all of them, you have 6258. Okay, so you go from each category and you figure out the percentage. So now that you know the total to be 6258, you go to each category and say the 751 divided by 6258 and 100. That's going to give you some percentage there. And then you can go and do the same thing for Social Security, the 1200 divided by 6258 times 100. Right, so that's going to give you some percentage here. You have net interest. So that net interest will have to also be divided by the total is 6258 times 100, and you're gonna have some percentage here. So basically what I'm describing on this table is what you have right here. So we're dividing everything by 6258 times 100. So the difference is 12%. Social Security 12 divided by that. Convert it into percentages so we know what the corresponding values are in percentages, which is good to know. So the next task is for you to do it yourself. So question number 2, do it yourself. So instead of doing more calculation this time, you're going to use the percentages we have here to draw a pie chart showing US federal spending. Okay, so let's move on to problem situation 2, measuring change with percentage. So let's take just brief example here. Trump lost the popular vote by 2.1% percentage point. Is this an absolute or relative change? Yeah, it's an absolute change, okay? Because they just took, whatever the winning, minus the loser, and the difference is 2.1%. So that's just absolute number there. It's not right, it's not relative. So another question is Trump had 14% more electoral votes than Clinton. Is this absolute or relative? So 14% more is like, so in comparison, there is comparing it to the other person that is 14% more. So this is a relative change, okay? And it's comparing to other events. Example 6. Example 6 will show us more about absolute change and relative change. So here, this is like weather data from Boise, Idaho. The snowfall is 19.8 inches, and Moline, Illinois, snowfall is 33.3 inches. Okay, So the question is, how many more inches does Moline get? How many more inches does Moline get? So from our example, we saw that if you say Trump had 14% more, then that's relative because it's just directly comparing to the other events. So here, how many more inches does Moline get? So we can just look at their snowfall data and figure that out. So snowfall in Idaho, Boise, Idaho is 19.8, and in Moline, it's 33.3. So what's the difference? 33.3 minus 19.8, which is 13.5 inches more. Okay, so in Moline, Illinois, there is usually 13.5 inches of snow more than Boise, Idaho. So in this case, we're doing, in this particular one, is an absolute change. So we are comparing snowfall, so 33.3 minus 19.8. So that's going to be absolute change. So the B part is, what percentage more snow does Moline get? Okay, we get into percentages here. So this is how much snow Moline is getting more compared to Boise, Idaho. And this is the 19.8 is the snowfall in Boise. So 13.5 divided by 19.8. So that means 13.5 more divided by the original figures for Boise times 100. It's going to give us the percentage more. So which means that Moline gets about 68.2% more snow, right? Yeah, 68.2 more snow in Moline compared to Idaho. All right, so that's easy. It's a relative change. We're comparing the percentage, well, the amount of more snow in Moline compared that to Boise, Idaho. And we want to know the percentage, so times 100. So this is going to be give us 68.2% more snow in Moline, Idaho than Boise. And part C, what percentage less snow does Boise get compared to Moline? Okay. So the difference between the snow is 13.5. And so we're comparing it to so Moline is getting this much more snow. And this is the original snow amount. This is by how more. Okay, times 100. So this is going to give us 40.5 less snow. So if you go from Moline to Idaho, you'll probably get 40% less snow. Okay, so all these figures we're doing here um, is more relative at this point, when you compare the percentage in this way. Okay, so the next thing is for you to try some of these questions yourself. and see if we can do them, and also relate them to some of the concepts we've learned in this topic. All right, so if you're back from your do it yourself, I just want to make sure you're doing it right. So you receive $75 dinner bill, and you are supposed to add 18% tip. What should be the total? So well, this type of questions, you have to get the original price. Once you get that, and then you put the percentage rate. So I would say 75 is my original price. We have to pay 18% rate. Okay. So what is 18% of 75? What is that? So this is the same as 18 divided by 100, or 0.8. And then what is your the amount you pay in taxes? Okay, so this is gonna be about 13.5. And if you have 13.5, you want to know the total you add. Okay, so 65 plus 75 plus 13.5. Okay, so 75 plus 13.5 would be your total. Okay, so which came down to 88. So you receive 75, you're supposed to add 18% tip. What's the total? Well, 88.5 is the total. Okay, I hope that gives you a good introduction to the collaboration, and that way you're able to go in there and do the collaboration on your own and be comfortable with some of the content of the collaboration. Thank you very much, and make sure you leave any comments in the video description. Thank you very much.